Hi, and welcome to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. You're listening to Free for All Friday on Tuesday. Remember to call 888-589-8840 if you would like to join the program. We'll talk about anything that's on your mind since this is Free for All Friday on Tuesday. But here are a couple things I'd particularly like to hear from you. We are going to celebrate Thanksgiving Day after tomorrow. So I want to hear from you about what you're thankful for this Thanksgiving. What are you thankful for? Honestly, genuinely, from the bottom of your heart, you are grateful for. I don't want you to make up stuff. I don't want you to say stuff that you know you're supposed to be thankful for. I want you to call this program and share with our listening audience the things that you are honest to God thankful for his goodness, for his grace in your life. 888-589-8840. Now, here's a couple of other things I want to have you respond to. Let me mention this, first of all, a piece by Michael Barone talking about the impact of broken families on economic growth. And this is just a reminder, by the way, that conservatism is a seamless garment, that you cannot separate out some part of conservatism and carve it out from the rest. You got a lot of Republicans want to do that. All they want to do is talk about economic issues. They want to talk about tax policy. They want to talk about fiscal policy. They want to talk about military policy, national defense, but they don't want to talk about the homosexual agenda. They don't want to talk about abortion. They don't want to talk about school choice, these more controversial issues. But what this is a reminder of, what Michael Barone writes about, is there's an enormous cost to our economy of broken families. In other words, the number one predictor of poverty in America is family breakdown. The number one antidote to poverty is marriage. Women can lift themselves out of poverty about 75% of the time simply by marrying the father of their children. It instantly lifts them out of poverty. And so Michael Barone's point is, and Michael Barone is not even really a social conservative. He's probably pro-abortion. I think he's pro-same-sex marriage. But his point is that you look at the economic outcomes for children who have been raised in broken homes, fractured families, and you compare it to the economic outcomes of children who were raised in intact two-parent families, there is simply no comparison. So the point he's making is there's a huge impact with family disintegration. It affects the economy. You can't separate out policies that make for strong marriages. You can't ignore them. You can't dismiss them because they're part of that meddlesome social issues. We don't want to mess with that. We don't want to be distracted with that because there is a direct correlation, direct connection between strong families and a healthy economy. And weak families and a staggering economy cannot separate out the two. It is a seamless garment. Now, here's another story, and I want you to react to this. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. It's a piece from thehill.com talking about a study released by the Pew Research Center, interesting enough, saying that parents with daughters lean Republican. Here's how the piece begins by Mario Trujillo in The Hill, one of the most widely read political websites in D.C. Parents who only have daughters are more likely to identify with the GOP, a new study suggests. The Pew Research Center highlighted a study which found either having only daughters or having daughters first had a statistically significant effect on the parent's political party. Parents who only have daughters are 11% more likely to identify with the Republican Party. And it's interesting, this piece goes on to say, this is interesting because of the admission. Now, the Hill tries to cut it down the middle. They don't try to lean left or to the right, although most of the people that write for them are pretty clearly left-leaning. But they're trying to carve this one right down the middle. And the interesting thing, he says, the link was strongest with wealthier and educated families. In other words, the more education somebody has, the more wealth they have, the more the chances are that if they have girls or girls first, they will tend to be more conservative in their political outlook. Here's a paragraph. If individual interests lie in genetic endurance, both men and women with daughters should prefer socially conservative policies favored by the Republican Party and emphasis on family and teen abstinence, which stress investment in children, reads a draft of the report. Now, the Pew Research Center, that's where this report's coming from, they lean left. And this is amazing. But they don't even realize what they're doing, because what they are doing is they are admitting the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, the difference between conservatives and liberals. What do conservatives believe in? They have an emphasis on family, on teen abstinence, and investment in children. I mean, this is Pew Research Center admitting that's the difference between conservatives and liberals. That's a pretty striking thing. So here's the question I have for you. Did having children make you more conservative? Or did having daughters make you more conservative? What impact did it have on your political outlook when you started to raise a family, when you started to have 8 children? How did it affect your political outlook, your political worldview? 888-589-8840. So I want to hear from you, whatever you're thankful about. I want to hear about that. Want to hear about how having children affected your political outlook. And then one other story I want to read and get you to react to. This is a piece from cnsnews.com from information released by the Centers for Disease Control. And the question is going to be, do you think that we are over-diagnosing ADHD and over-prescribing medication for ADHD? That's the question. I want you to weigh in on that, 888-589-8840. Here's a couple of excerpts from the story. More than 20% of the 14-year-old boys in the United States have been diagnosed at some point in their lives with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, I'll be honest with you. I think what they're being diagnosed as is they're being diagnosed as males. They're just healthy, young boys growing toward adulthood. That's kind of the essence of being a boy, is being active. Now, I'm not saying there aren't problems, and I'm not saying that that all kinds of activity ought to be permitted. Not saying that at all. I mean, that's where corporal punishment comes in. And boys may need that more than girls. I remember when our kids were tiny, I'd come home, I'd talk to Deb, and I'd say, "What did you do today?" And she'd say, "I spanked JD." And Jana, the daughter, rarely had to be spanked. Now, when she had to be spanked, sometimes she would have to be spanked 3 times before it penetrated, but she didn't need it quite as often as Jay needed it. So I'm not saying that boys don't need to be disciplined and that anything they want to do is permissible. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that we may have a culture that is so emasculated males and has so feminized our culture that we diagnose maleness as a disorder, because that's what this is called. This is a disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Something disordered about this individual. The study indicated that American boys are 125% more likely than girls to be diagnosed and 127% more likely than girls to be medicated for it. That's twice as likely, more than twice as likely to be medicated for ADHD than girls. 13.3% of American 11-year-old boys are being medicated for ADHD. 13.3%. That's better than 1 in 8. That's almost 1 in 7 boys who are age 11 are on medication, prescription drugs for ADHD. They're getting drugged to their eyeballs with Ritalin or whatever it is they use these days for ADHD. Overall, the percentage of children from 4 through 17 years of age who have been diagnosed with ADHD increased 42% from 2003 to 2011. In other words, this is a problem where increasingly the diagnosis is ADHD and increasingly the solution to that is medication. 42% increase in diagnoses just in the last 8 years. The study also found that children in public health programs like Medicaid and the state children's health insurance program were 53% more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than children with private health insurance. Now, part of it, you're talking about children that are in programs designed for lower income families. So you're probably going to have some structural disintegration, some family structure problems. And I think, boy, what young boys need, they've got to have a dad in the home. That's what they need. They need a male role model. They need his strength. They need his stability. They need his presence. They need to know that he's there to discipline them, That's just not the only reason he's there. He's there to love them, invest in them, help them with their homework, tuck them in, pray with them, read them stories before bedtime and all that stuff. But they need to know that there is a masculine presence in the home that is going to uphold a certain standard of behavior, a certain standard of the way you relate to your mother, for instance, to his wife. Young boys have got to have that. When they grow up without that, then this is then they run into some behavioral disorders. And that's, I think, what's being alluded to here. Nearly 1 in 5 high school boys and 1 in 11 high school girls has been diagnosed with ADHD. Well, let's grab a phone call before we are done with this segment. Let's go to Josh in Seattle, Washington. And by the way, if you live in a city that doesn't have one of our radio stations, you can catch us all the time, audio streaming, live audio streaming, audio and video at afr.net, afr.net, audio and video streaming live. Also, we got podcasts, we got apps for the iPhone, the Android, and the iPad. You can listen on the go. Let's go to Josh. Josh, Seattle, Washington. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Fisher.
Hey.
Before I ask my question, I want to apologize 2 times. I know you were wanting to stay on topic, but I wanted to call today and ask this question because I didn't know if you would be on air Friday.
Uh-huh.
And also, last time I called, I said that Thomas Jefferson was an atheist, and I was wrong about that, and you corrected me on it. So thank you for correcting me on that. I apologize.
All right. Well, you're sure welcome, Josh. And this is Free for All Friday on Tuesday, so we're not going to limit ourselves to the topics that I've suggested. Go ahead. What's on your mind? And I may have to hold you over into the next segment because we just got about a minute left. So go ahead and get started, and we'll keep you over if we need to.
My question is that how come the Founding Fathers didn't illegalize Islam back then? Because I heard about how you were saying that, and I don't understand how they knew how Islam was back then. I mean, Thomas Jefferson went to war with some Muslim pirates. How come they didn't, from the get-go, they knew it existed. They knew about it. How come they didn't go ahead and say, we know this is an issue, let's go ahead and ban it, instead of just like, we're going to ignore it? I'm completely confused on that.
All right, Josh. Well, listen, I'll give you a beginning of an answer, and then I will finish the answer on the other side of the break. The reason is it never occurred to the Founding Fathers because there were no Muslims in the United States at the time of the founding. They just weren't here. 99.8% of the population was Christian. The other 0.2% were Jews. There just simply were no Muslims. It wasn't even an issue that was on the radar. More when we get back after the break. Focal Point, AFR Talk.